Picture this. A solitary rider pushes through a set of dusty batwing doors and steps into a saloon. The piano music cuts off, conversations die mid-sentence, and every face turns toward the stranger. It's the classic Western scene Hollywood has burned into our minds: adventure, drama, and heroic gunfights. But what if I told you almost none of that is accurate? The truth is far filthier, far rougher, and nothing like the polished movie version. Today, we're stripping away the legend to expose the gritty reality of real frontier saloons. And believe me, whatever you think was dirty, the real thing was worse. If you love digging into the true history of the Old West, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss another journey into the past. Now let's step through those swinging doors into what the West actually looked like. 1. The buildings themselves. Forget the impressive saloon sets built by movie studios. Early saloons were usually thrown together fast. Nothing more than makeshift tents, rough sod huts, or shacks built from scrap lumber in mining camps and railroad stops. As settlements expanded, these crude structures became simple wooden buildings, often sporting a fake facade to look bigger and more respectable than they really were. Only in wealthy towns like Deadwood or Tombstone would you find the fancy, stylish saloons we see in films. But the first thing you'd really notice was the smell. It hit you like a wall: stale alcohol, cheap whiskey, layers of sweat, thick tobacco smoke, and the constant drift of dust and manure blowing in from the unpaved streets. Hollywood's tinkling piano wasn't common either. Music cost money. Most saloons sounded like mumbling conversations mixed with the harsh coughing of sick men. Visually, everything looked worn out and filthy. The floors were rough planks sprinkled with sawdust to soak up spilled drinks and tobacco spit, leaving them permanently damp and grimy. The bar top stayed sticky, and dim kerosene lamps filled the room with smoky haze. And those famous bat-wing doors? They weren't for dramatic entrances. They were just there to let some air circulate. 2. Breeding grounds for disease. Saloons weren't just dirty, they were perfect incubators for sickness. The most dangerous threats inside weren't gunmen, but germs. Bathing on the frontier was a rare luxury. Water had to be hauled, heated, and shared. Families took turns washing in the same small tub, dad first, the youngest child last, leaving the water cold, greasy, and murky. Dental care wasn't much better. People picked their teeth with knives, and if a tooth got infected, the town barber or even a blacksmith yanked it out with pliers and a swig of whiskey for courage. Town sanitation was almost non-existent. With no sewage systems, waste was dumped outdoors and eventually tracked straight into the saloon on people's boots. Lice, roaches, and swarms of flies thrived in these conditions. It was a perfect setup for disease to spread. Cholera could sweep through a packed saloon thanks to shared, unwashed drinking glasses. Tuberculosis spread fast in the hot, smoky rooms, and smallpox, one of the deadliest diseases of the era, could tear through a town in no time. The harsh reality? You were far more likely to die from something you caught in a saloon than from a shootout. 3. The whiskey was practically poison. The filth didn't end with the building or the people. The drinks themselves were often dangerous. That smooth, aged bourbon cowboys sip in movies? Very rare. Most frontier whiskey was awful, cheap, and downright toxic. It went by nicknames like coffin varnish, tarantula juice, and rot gut, and for good reason. Real whiskey was expensive, so saloon keepers faked it. They started with low-quality grain alcohol, then mixed in burnt sugar for color and even chewing tobacco for flavor and an extra kick. The worst part? Many recipes called for poisonous additives: turpentine, creosote, and other chemicals you'd never want anywhere near your body. The result was a harsh brew that could make a person violently ill, and rot gut wasn't a metaphor. It described exactly what it did, and even the beer didn't offer much relief. Without refrigeration, it was warm, flat, and often stale. Sometimes saloon owners spiked it with narcotics to make it seem stronger. 4. Vice and violence were nothing like the movies. Saloons definitely earned their reputation for rowdiness, but the truth is far less glamorous than the Hollywood version. The classic bar-wide brawl, chairs flying, bottles smashing, crowds swinging, is mostly a cinematic fantasy. Real violence inside saloons was usually quick, targeted, and deadly. Fights weren't chaotic melees. They were sudden confrontations between a couple of men, often sparked by a gambling argument or a poorly chosen insult. Because these encounters could turn fatal fast, many frontier towns required customers to hand over their guns at the door. This early form of gun control meant that most conflicts ended with fists or knives rather than bullets. Gambling was the heart of saloon life. Some card dealers were known for fairness and built solid reputations, while others, professional cheat artists, traveled from town to town tricking inexperienced players with stacked decks and clever scams. Hollywood also gets the role of women wrong. Saloon girls weren't automatically prostitutes. Their main job was to entertain, singing, dancing, chatting with lonely men, and encouraging more drink sales. For many women, it was a way to earn money and maintain a degree of independence. Prostitution, on the other hand, was separate and carried far greater risk. 5. Not everyone was welcome. Despite the image of the West as a lawless free-for-all, saloons were highly structured spaces with strong, unwritten rules and clear lines of exclusion. These establishments were the social hub of the white male frontier. Cowboys, miners, sheriffs, and even outlaws all mingled inside. The difference between an outlaw and a lawman could be razor thin, and you might find them seated only a few feet apart. But boundaries existed. Respectable women avoided saloons entirely. They were considered improper places for them. Racial segregation was also widespread. Native Americans and Chinese immigrants were routinely denied entry. Black men, who played a major role in the West, were often barred from white-owned saloons and opened their own establishments instead. Surprisingly, another excluded group was U.S. soldiers. Many frontier citizens distrusted the military and viewed soldiers with resentment, so saloon owners often kept them out. For those allowed inside, strict behavioral expectations applied. A man's privacy was sacred. You never asked someone about his past. Another unwritten rule involved buying drinks. If someone offered to buy you a round, declining it was considered a serious insult. Hollywood's polished version of the saloon bears little resemblance to the real thing. Actual frontier saloons were dirty, smoky, disease-ridden places serving dangerous whiskey to a narrow group of patrons who lived by rigid social codes. Yet this raw, unfiltered truth says much more about the American West than the myth ever could. It reminds us that the frontier wasn't filled with larger-than-life heroes. It was populated by ordinary people trying to get by in an unforgiving world. So tell us, what shocked you the most about real Wild West saloons? The toxic booze, the spread of deadly diseases, or the strict rules about who could enter? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.